Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel. You know what time it is, update time once again in MCOC, and I am back with everything that you need to know about the May 2024 update. Let's jump right in, starting off with number 1, the new champions for May, which are Silver Sable and Negasonic Teenage Warhead. These were both teased earlier this week. Silver Sable is going to be a skill champ, and Negasonic is going to be a mutant champ. I personally don't know too much about these characters. Most of my Silver Sable experience comes from the Spider-Man game, and then Negasonic Teenage Warhead, I don't think many people at all had heard of her until she was in the Deadpool movie. They both look pretty cool. I kind of wish Negasonic looked a little bit more like she does in the movies. She looks a little like the hairdo doesn't look quite right here, but I have no doubt that the art team is going to absolutely nail the animations as they do every month. Can't really say much more about these characters. I have seen the kits, of course, but they are under embargo still. I will tease, however, that Negasonic in particular is probably going to be quite popular for a specific Battlegrounds matchup, and you'll probably see what I mean as soon as her deep dive comes out, probably this coming weekend as this video goes live. Number 2, we've had a nice little break since the Winter of Woe Gauntlet quest came out just about a month ago, and it is time to gear up for the next round of seasonal Everest content called the Spring of Sorrow, which is going to start on May 15th. So Spring of Sorrow is going to function exactly the same way that Winter of Woe did. There will be 4 fights released on a 2-week cadence, and then at the end there will be another Gauntlet-style quest. Objective points should also work the same way. There will be a point for completion, 2 Paragon objectives, and then a Valiant objective for each fight, and then there will be similar objectives for the Gauntlet quest. Now, there are presumably more Valiant players now than there were before, since 8.4 was recently released. So if you just got Valiant, be sure to do all of the Valiant objectives. Now, in the first round, we had an extra grace point from that robot objective. Do not count on that happening again. So everyone will only have, I think, a single grace point to work with for the entirety of this event. So be careful. Don't skip an objective unless you absolutely have to, or you can't do it, you don't have the counter, because you will not be able to skip any objective for the rest of the event. Number 3, the champion buff for May is Mr. Sinister. The buff will be live in the game when the patch drops. I have some information here on all the updates to his kit. So first off, they have changed his ability to block unblockable special attacks to not work against the tech class. So this is helpful for somebody like Viv Vision, who has that unblockable special 1 spam in her rotation, so she'll still be able to get past his block. Second bullet point is, for some reason in very large text, reduces the potency of incoming bleed effects by 100%. So notice this says effects and not debuffs. So this should include instant bleeds like you would find against Bullseye and against Nightcrawler. So something to keep in mind there. Reduces Purify ability accuracy by 100% against skill champs. This should function basically the same as it does with APOC. APOC, of course, works against any class. Sinister's is just going to work against the skill class. But either way, it is still very, very valuable utility at that 100% value. His regen has also been changed slightly, so you used to be able to reduce the amount of regen that he would get, but you could never reverse his healing. So now you cannot reduce his healing at all. So things like the Despair Mastery and Petrify debuff, things like that, are no longer going to work, and you're going to have to straight up heal block him or just deal with the regen that you're going to get from critting him. Regen also triggers on well-timed blocks. This is more of an offensive ability, not really too much of an issue defensively. The biggest change is kind of how his damage rotation works, specifically working with his heavy attacks and a special 1. So previously, when you would start charging his heavy attack, you would gain a precision buff, and then if you continue to hold the heavy while the stun from like parry was paused, for example, you would then gain a cruelty buff as well. So these have been removed and replaced with a vicious passive when you start charging the heavy, which is going to increase the potency of damaging debuffs by 30%. And then if you continue to hold the heavy, you're going to start inflicting bleeds on yourself every 0.7 seconds. And since you are reducing the potency of bleeds by 100%, that's essentially free willpower healing for yourself. Then once you have all those bleeds on yourself, then you're going to go into the special 1. So previously, the special 1 took all damaging debuffs from you and kind of transferred them as is to the defender. So this is no longer the case. The effects that you are transferring from yourself to the defender get changed into degen debuffs. So even if you have, bleeds, poisons, ruptures, whatever it is on yourself, you fire off that special 1, they're going to be changed into degen on the defender. So it is now no longer enough to simply be immune to the debuffs that you're applying to him, because if he uses that special one, they're going to be sent back. And even if you block or dex the special one, this effect still occurs. So you basically need to use a robot champ for Mr. Sinister now if you're going to be applying any sort of dot damage to him. In addition, the special one will stack will put a bleed on himself, a non-stacking bleed. So when you bait out the special one, if you bait out a second special one within that 20-second time frame, he is going to send that bleed debuff over to you as a degen. So again, you really, really, really want to be using a robot champ for him going forward. So a lot of really good options for him already. Warlock is going to come to mind for most people. Omega Sentinel has access to a heal block as well. Very, very good. And then the aforementioned Viv Vision should also be very good for him as well. And then his signature ability, I don't think there was any change here. He's going to begin each fight with 3 random passive effects from the signature ability. So the signature ability itself isn't different. When he defeats champions of a certain class, he gains extra abilities, but when he has the initial awakening, he's going to start a fight with 3 of those random effects. All in all, looks like much more of a defensive threat. He's going to demand a specific type of attacker. When you see him on defense, again, you really want a heal blocker or a robot, preferably both. And I think as an attacker, he is going to be much more potent than he is now, especially if you have the Sinister relic on him, which gives you a guaranteed bleed on the striker and then a chance for a second bleed. He is going to be able to stack up the degen on an opponent very easily. And remember, when you charge the heavy, debuffs on the opponent are paused. So after you fire off that special one, you parry again, you hold the heavy attack, and all that degen is paused until you release the heavy. So really excited to see what this guy is going to do. I think he's going to really mess some people up in Battlegrounds for sure. Number 4 is a new way to unlock story progression levels. So for players up to and including Thronebreaker, there are now going to be alternative ways to unlock those progression levels by ranking up champions rather than going through the story content. So I think the intent here is to help players along who are like hard stuck in story content. Remember that the earlier story acts are much more of a roster check than story content is these days in like Act 7 and Act 8. And I personally remember being roadblocked on the 6.2 Sinister boss for probably 3 or 5 months because I literally did not have a single champion on my roster who could do that fight. So I think they want to kind of eliminate that experience and similar experiences for players. So, for example, Thronebreaker today requires you to complete Act 6.4 and have at least one rank 3 6-star champion. So going forward, it might be something like if you have 5 rank 4 6-star champions, you would also get Thronebreaker. So you wouldn't have to necessarily finish the story content. This is not going to let you skip that content. So you can get Thronebreaker, but you're not passed to the Grandmaster, for example. So you can overpower your roster and come back and do it later. It will give them access to higher difficulties of EQ and also the side quest, which I think is one of the goals here as well. The route of ranking up champs to get a progression title is pretty interesting, especially if, the example that I just kind of threw out there just now, if the disparity between, 1 rank 3 and doing this quest or like 5 rank 4s, like that's a pretty large gap. So players who are kind of in that position are really going to have to make a choice there. Be curious to see what people think of that. Let me know in the comments below what you think of that for sure. Number 5 is something called Incursions Challenge Sectors. I don't think this is a surprise. I think this was teased when sagas were announced. So this is a brand new sector in Incursions, comparable to the difficulty level of Sector 6, but the catch here is that you can only use saga tagged champions. So I'm going to be completely honest, this does not sound like fun at all to me. Incursions is the game mode that I pay attention to the least for various reasons, and in my opinion, needs some pretty significant changes. Making a Zone 25 run with anything other than like the really broken champs like your Hercules, your Silk, your Angela thing, almost always for me leads to being roadblocked in like Zone 18 or 19 or whatever by some ridiculous champ node combination, and then you've just wasted the last 2 hours of your life for nothing. But all that being said, I'm sure there will be Nightcrawler tokens in the challenge sectors here. So if you want him, you're going to have to grit your teeth and just get through it. Hopefully, the Nightcrawler tokens aren't locked at Zone 25. That would really be awful. There are some really good Incursions champs in these Saga tags. Serpent comes to mind. That's probably who I will end up going with for whatever runs I end up doing. But my aim for next month is to do as little of these as possible. Number 6 is a buff to Alliance Quest, a very small buff. So there will be 6 new bonus buffs for summoners to choose from when you start AQ. This will be available in at the choice node in maps 4 through 8. So you'll have a total of 12 different buffs to choose from going forward. No idea what these are going to be, but giving players additional options here, I think, is a win in my book. Me personally, we run map 8, of course, in SSX. My AQ champ, I run King Groot, and I do pretty much every fight except for one, I think, with King Groot. The prowess hack with the regen is the one that I always pick. So maybe I'll luck out and there'll be a better one for me personally, but again, giving players additional choices on what to do for their bonus buff, I think, is a big win. That's going to do it for the May patch notes, folks. Let me know in the comments below what you are most excited about in May, be it one of the new champions, Silver Sable, or Negasonic Teenage Warhead, or perhaps you are excited to get some of those juicy rewards from the Seasonal Everest content starting on May 15th, or perhaps instead you're looking forward to that Sinister buff, which looks pretty good as well. Regardless of all of that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.